Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Conley. I am the Chief of P20 Educational Technology at the Ohio Board of Regents. Welcome to this book chat with Tom Vander Ark. I'm honored to be here, and I thank Lisa and folks for asking me to open this up. Let me give you a little information about my title. Folks always ask me, well, you're at the Regents, why is it P20? Well, at the Regents, we touch a lot of different technology aspects of education that really spans from the E-Tech Commission, the Chancellor being the chair. I'm his designee on that commission, and we have a few commission members here today. We touch the whole span of education in Ohio. So that's why we chose the title we did. I've been there for roughly, feels like about 12 years, but it's been about 10 months. And it's obviously been very active. This past year has seen a lot of activity in Ohio, especially in the education world, and I expect we're going to see some more changes in the future. So what we've done at the Regents is became very aggressive in looking at all the organizations we have, and there are basically created through consortia, which is a directive basically created by the Chancellor of the Board of Regents. One of the first things I did when I walked through the door was kind of took a step back, looked at those organizations, and saw that we could do a lot of streamlining and improving of efficiencies in getting those organizations to work better and more economical. So we basically took the Ohio Supercomputer Center, we took the Ohio ORNet, which is known by, but it's the Ohio Academic Resource Network, which is the broadband backbone of our state, and the Ohio Learning Network, and merged them into one organization that is housed at the Ohio State University, where I attended, and I think I sat somewhere over there in the stacks one day, a long time ago, but we merged them, and Ohio State is the fiduciary agent and the operation and management function of those consortia at Ohio State University. Now we've also taken the Ohio Link group, which is another fabulous group here in Ohio that has linked all of our higher education institutions, and they basically aggregate and share information, and it has just saved millions of dollars when it comes to the libraries here in Ohio on higher education. We've taken some of that technical staff and placed it in OTech 2 and created a really vibrant organization where we get a lot of folks that are working together now, where these organizations were siloed and we put them back together. And then the last consortia, which actually resides at the Wright State University, is the Articulation and Transfer Network, which a lot of you, some of you are familiar with, but basically provides the guarantees of college courses taken at particular USO schools, that translates to another Ohio school and the student is given credit. So those are kind of some of the organizations. Like I said, I talked about E-Tech Commission. That has been, Kate is here today, and like I said, there is Bruce Harkins, one of our commissioners, is here as well. We have been doing a lot in that space. And also, we have been working with the Ohio Resource Center. In House Bill 153, as you all know, they moved the clearinghouse. It is still responsibility of the Chancellor's office, but we have moved it, and it is now housed at the Ohio Resource Center under the College of Education. Dean Cheryl Ochterberg could not be here today, but the Dean is, I think, will be very exciting to work with. She is an extremely intelligent woman, and I have a lot of confidence in her in making that clearinghouse and strengthening that clearinghouse. This clearinghouse has been around for a while. A lot of you know that. A lot of you have been in this business for a while. And I think it's the usage of that I think that was looked at, and one of the reasons of moving it to where it is. So I expect big things there. And I'll stop talking now and introduce Chad Wick, who is the founder and CEO of KnowledgeWorks. But before I do that, I wanted to say thank you to everyone. I appreciate you being here today. Chad?
Probably in the last decade, there's no one who's invested more in real dollars between what we've invested and what we've brought in to manage. We put in over $100 million in Ohio public education. So we feel like we deserve a seat at the table to protect that investment. So you're going to see us. We do have a point of view. We think we've got a lot of experience. We've observed a lot from many different points of view, and we care as much as anybody can care about the well-being of Ohio kids. So with that, a little bit of editorial comment about our interest and continuing interest in Ohio education. I'm really here for one purpose, and that's to introduce both a colleague and a friend. Somebody said to me about my bow tie, I had actually asked Gordon Gee to do this, and he couldn't come, so I thought, well, I'll wear the bow tie today. Partially represent what Gordon would have done. But it's a great pleasure for me to do this because, as I said, Tom is not just a professional friend, but a personal friend and colleague. And there's a lot I could say about him and stand up here and take part of why I think you're really here is to hear his views on what is emerging as this powerful transformational force in education, how we organize thoughtfully digital content and make it really be useful as more than just a tool, but actually a change strategy. Tom is, I would kind of say, you might think of the Oracle from Omaha. Maybe I'll call Tom the seer from Seattle, because if you think of anybody coming from the Gates Foundation, who was the first executive director of education for Gates and served in that role for a number of years and really put many, many things in motion. If you really thought in this country, we had a lot of disconnected but interested philanthropy, but it was really not just that Bill and Melinda committed a lot of dollars. It had to have action and energy behind it, how those dollars were used, how they were organized, who they brought to the table, and that was really all Tom. What is going on in New York, what goes on in Chicago, LA, all the major cities, Houston, the funding collaboratives that were all created in those cities and in many, many other places around the country, those were all really organized by Tom and a team of people, but mostly by his efforts of inspiring philanthropy to get off the sideline as just a check writer, get in the game, be involved, and in fact, he had a huge impact on how KnowledgeWorks actually played the role that it has done over the years instead of being more of a classic philanthropy. Tom has written tons. He is such an active blogger, and he started a company called Getting Smart, and of course now has a book, Getting Smart, which he's going to talk about in a broader way, I think, about all he's seeing. But I think of all the areas that why we should really recognize this is an important opportunity for us to listen, pay attention. Is in the role that Tom was in, he had access to virtually everybody, from the largest policy leaders in the country to the leaders of all the major philanthropies, major superintendents, and it gave him the opportunity to really see and understand where were these most dramatic opportunities that could be the most transformational aspects as we really do truly move past the old industrial model. And I think where he came down is, and as an engineer, he's a thoughtful guy. He is going to think this through carefully. But he came down in this area where we all know we can't stop it. It's the role of technology, but how does smart technology really, really become transformational and truly even the playing field for all kids, give all kids really great learning opportunities? And so he came down in that space, and of all the things that he could have focused on, he's really decided that this is the area that has the most opportunity, the biggest need, and one that he's going to put some real energy and effort behind. So he put a venture fund together. He's the chairman of the board of International Association of K-12 Online Learning, INACOL, and still a board member of XPRIZE and a number of other organizations that he gives great guidance to. So with that said, I think we really are fortunate that his view of this isn't just that of an author. It's really probably the most informed view, I think, that someone who could have, who's come at this not from the standpoint of an academic or representing a personal interest. It's really looking at this from the standpoint of what is going to really make a difference. So with that, I'm going to read one little passage from Tom's book, because I think this is the one we've got where it impacts us. And he said, for education leaders, it's time for you to put a stake in the ground. With pressure to achieve more with less, you know that your schools can't keep doing things the same old way. It's time to lead a conversation about the shift to personal digital learning, more engaged learning, extended learning time, and lifting the floor and blowing away the ceiling. People and politics will be more important than academics and technology during the transition. We know that. And you'll need to lead by example by being a digital learner yourself. So with that admonition for why we need to pay attention to this, I'm going to ask Tom to come on up and have the opportunity to share more wisdom in Ohio. So,
thank you, Chad. But it is great to be back in Ohio. As Chad indicated, I've spent a lot of time in Ohio for 15 years. And Chad and I, and then more broadly, the KnowledgeWorks staff and I have worked very closely together since 1999. And while I was helping Bill and Melinda start the Gates Foundation, Chad was forming KnowledgeWorks, and I think we've really learned together, we've worked together, we've succeeded together, we've failed together, and so I deeply appreciate Chad's leadership and KnowledgeWorks leadership here in Ohio. I want to start with some comments from you, and then I'm going to probably talk for just 10 minutes and hit a couple highlights from the book, and then we'll go back to a dialogue. But we have such an informed group. I want to start with you first, and I want to spend a few minutes on what you're excited about the shift to personal digital learning, and then what you're concerned about. So at this point, no speeches, just try to capture headlines, and let's start with the things that you're excited about as we shift to personal digital learning. So, Chad, what are you excited about?
Endless array of content.
Yeah, so just instead of the curriculum being a stack of textbooks, you suddenly have access to a world of content. What else? Reggie, what are you excited about?
Culture change in learning and teaching.
Well, say one more sentence about a culture change.
Well, I think, it's going to take people a while to catch on to digital learning and blended education and all these notions. And I think that should be part of the process of
okay. We may come back to you, because the culture change may be on the concern side too, right? Making that happen. Yes, what are you excited about?
Learning opportunities available for students when they're ready for it.
Yeah, so not necessarily time bound and not necessarily location bound, but so more content, but sort of when and where you want. Yes?
Ohio's credit flexibility, because it opens wide the rest of what you're talking about.
Okay. Great. What else? What do you?
Along with this comment, the ability to customize learning opportunities.
Yeah.
So take that content and tailor it.
So not just rate and time, but increasingly sort of modality, right? So that you can learn in the best way for you, and I can learn in the best way for me. Yeah, that's very exciting. What else? Yes?
I think where educators have already articulated seeing positive outcomes when learners interface with technology. So it's almost you're half the way there, where they've seen the benefits. So now it's not persuading, cajoling, it's people are testimonials that, boy, I've seen a change, really what students can do, and it's changed my teaching.
Yeah. So in some respects, this is going to be, you talked about the culture change, but in some respects, the change that we're going through is different than anything that we've experienced. It is happening to us, sort of top down, bottom up, inside out, right? So and maybe we can put that both in the plus and the minus column. So, what? Yes.
The global environment of digital learning.
And say another sentence about that. So, what would you put in the plus column? Just that it opens kids up to a world of...
It opens them up to a world of content, but it also opens them up to a global perspective that I think is important in this culture.
You know, yesterday I was in Chicago with a geography teacher. I mean, just think about the ability to teach geography with Google Maps, right? The fact that you can sort of go in, like zoom in on any house on the planet. You can visit any city in almost a virtual reality way is really pretty extraordinary. So our kids are growing up more connected with the rest of the world. What else? Yes?
Providing high-quality educational opportunities for all students.
Right, so just the ability to connect with great teachers, great content, so sort of lifting the floor of opportunity for kids. Yeah. And, you know, particularly not just urban kids, but also rural kids, right? Appalachian kids. Anything else? All right, let's do the, yes.
The potential to shift from teacher-centered learning or teacher as expert to a more student-based kind of learning, so they're truly learning. More
student-centered learning, sort of, you know, at your time rate and in your mode. All right, let's flip to the. So that all sounds good. What are you worried about? Headlines on the stuff that you're worrying about.
Accessibility of broadband.
Broadband, right? So it's the same sort of thing, right? Great opportunity, access to great content, but it's only true that you can vary rate and time if you can get connected. So, what else? Yes?
I'm worried that we can't move fast enough to get our teachers ready, the capacity out there, our parents ready.
Right. So, getting teachers ready, right? So it's the culture change and the skill change. And where's Corinne? We were talking about teacher prep beforehand. So both prep and PD. And we'll come back and talk about that. What else?
Constant change of device and platform. Every 3 months, something new, something different. Yeah.
So we, Bob and I, were catching up beforehand, and on one hand, we're really excited about all the new things like an iPad. On the other hand, it's this sort of frustrating array that stuff isn't quite where we'd like it to be, and it doesn't quite knit together as neatly as we'd like.
Yeah, accessibility. I'll go back to accessibility for our students in rural areas in Appalachia and in other places.
Right. So a whole new promise for them, but right, a challenge of making sure that we're ensuring access. Yes.
And then equity with that, so that all students have access to that, no matter their family finances.
Right. So there's a logistical thing, right, and there's a public policy aspect to it. Yes?
So if we talk about the flexibility for the students in terms of time and being able to learn to mastery at their own rate, then the concern might be the assessment that we have in place, the assessment systems that are everyone has to be learning at the same time and be tested at the same certain point, etc. So how do we mesh both?
Right. So Corinne said just assessment systems. So I'm going to put that in a broader category of we all grew up with a data poverty mindset, right? We were trying to run public schools with no information. I was a CFO for a public company, and then I became a public school superintendent. So I went from knowing what my sales per SKU were at 7 o'clock in the morning to no data on achievement, on operations, finances, customer satisfaction, nothing, like flying completely blind, right? So it's not just assessment, right? But it's the whole shift to big data. So tremendous opportunity, but lots of challenges. So we have to think differently about assessment, about data systems, about reporting, transparency. Yes.
The how-to. I recently met with some superintendents in my district, and some of them say, I've got digital books, I've got iPads.
Right.
No one really knows how to make the transition to a blended learning system.
Right, and so when we survey school superintendents and we say, are you offering online learning, 50 or 60% of them say yes, or we're working on that, right? But if you really go look at what's happening, not so much, right? So a big how-to. Yes?
A concern that the same technological tools available for learning are also available for entertaining and keeping people away from the learning. So it's almost like it could be a competition between
Yes.
the tools available for learning and those that pull people away into the realm of entertaining themselves.
Yes. So some new management challenges, both for teachers and parents, right? Good. That's a long enough list of concerns. Let's take a couple more.
Is it resistance, not only from within the educational community, but
Right.
from parents and communities themselves?
Right, and some irrational and some really good, but a fair amount of both, right? And Edward.
And I would kind of echo that to say that a concern from the standpoint of students being able to understand and adapt the technology to meet their needs, but a frustration from those in education, not maybe from an understanding of how to incorporate that, blocking that adaptation.
Right.
So there's this divide between the two.
Good. And I don't know, I'm going to link that back to the more opportunity and more distraction comment, right? Because we do have to teach our kids a different discipline of self-management, right? Self-control. And we need to help parents manage time online, right? So both are now a priority. All right. So the interesting observation of that quick conversation, there's a lot to be excited about and there's a lot to be concerned about. So it's an extraordinarily interesting time to be alive. And I do want to just stop and think about that with you for a minute, because I want to reflect on the fact that 1994, it was the year I became public school superintendent. We talked about that earlier, Bob. My daughter was in 4th grade in 1994. And 1994 was the year that the World Wide Web really exploded. It was really in history, you could mark that at the point where we ended a life in information scarcity and began life in a period of time with information abundance. So the challenge the year before, when my daughter was in 3rd grade, when she got the project on Egypt, was that there were 3 books in the library on Egypt. And in 1984, she had the good fortune to be in a classroom with a teacher who made very good use of this new thing called the web, where she was surfing the libraries in Cairo, right? So one year she had almost no information. The next year she had way too much and didn't quite know what to do with it. So that was really a pivotal year. And then 10 years ago, Wikipedia came around. And Wikipedia, I think of it as a threshold where Curtis Bonk, who wrote The World is Open, said, you can really think of that as the threshold where, with a broadband connection, anybody could learn anything, anywhere, for free or cheap. If we just stop and think about that, that's an extraordinary sort of a threshold, whereas as human beings on this planet, we sort of stepped into a new age, where if you do have broadband, you could learn almost anything, anywhere. And we're 10 years later, and our institutions of learning, both K-12 and higher ed, are really just now sort of coming to grips with that capability. And as we talked about before, Bob, the tool set is finally sort of catching up with our aspiration. For those of us that 15 years ago began to see glimpses of what this might look like, the tool set's finally catching up. And for those reasons, I'm all in on personal digital learning. I actually think it's the most important thing that anybody on this planet could work on. I mean, I actually think we have a chance in our lifetimes to extend quality secondary education to 500 million young people that don't have access to it today. Where Lisa's back there. Lisa and I were talking about this at lunchtime. That's really extraordinary. That is a world-shaping opportunity that we have an opportunity now that we didn't have 5 years ago of taking a tablet and open content and these blended formats and extending quality secondary education to hundreds of millions of kids in Africa, in India, and China. And I think that can do more to shape peace and prosperity on this planet than anything else that you could work on. So I think it's a big deal. I also think it's the most important thing that could happen in America, because I think for the first time we could actually bend the achievement curve. A lot of us have been at this for a long time, and we've worked hard for 20 or 30 years, and we haven't seen the results that we'd like. And I actually think we have in front of us, in this decade, the chance finally to see more productive schools that accomplish more and where they need to for less, or for not for a substantial increase in investment. So the reason that I say that, the reason I come to that conclusion are the three benefits that I tried to outline in this book, and that I talk about on gettingsmart.com every day. And it's customization, motivation, and equalization. And I'll just say a sentence about those because you talked about them already. So by customization, I mean the ability, as David said, to vary rate and location, but also, as Nicole said, the ability to customize learning so that each of us can have a path to mastery that's the most engaging, most efficient for us. Right? So my path may include competitive activities. It may include more gaming. Yours might include more collaborative activities, where each of us can have an experience that's sometimes together and sometimes individualized, that helps each of us learn as much as we possibly can. The net benefit of customization is that I think we can see kids learn more per hour. So that's the benefit that I'm looking for, is that more often than not that we have kids learning in the best way for them. The second is motivation, and it's closely coupled to that. I think the most important breakthroughs of this decade will be in motivation sciences. That I think the shift to big data, and by that I mean when a fifth grader has a 5,000 keystroke day, and a 10th grader has a 10,000 keystroke day, and when we get smart about the data behind those experiences, and I'm not just talking about the achievement analytics that you write a paper and you get a grade deposited in your grade book, or you play a math game and you have a grade deposited, but I'm also talking about the keystrokes that help me understand that it actually took me 8 times to get to an outcome in math, and Bob got to it in 3 times. So it tells me something about persistence, right? Behaviors, and what I think we'll discover is that we'll learn about motivational profiles. For 20 years, we've talked about learning styles, and I think what is going to be more profound is understanding persistence, the experiences that produce persistence, because that's closely related to effort, and we know that effort is important to achievement, and I think we're going to get smarter about that, and I think we'll end up borrowing. It's not that school's going to be full of games, but I do think we'll borrow strategies from game developers, and that we'll get smart about simple things like private failure and public success. Right? That's one secret about games, is that you can try and try and try, and then you show up on the leaderboard. Well, it took me 8 times to do what Bob did in 3, but I'm the one that knows that. So recognition systems, the ability to extend the number of trials, just getting smart about motivation, I think will mean that we'll get kids hooked on learning. They'll spend more hours per day, more hours per year in productive activity. And then the third one that David and others talked about, Chad started out, is sort of lifting the floor. I call it equalization, but When states and schools make sure that every student has a device that goes home with them, so that they have a device 24/7, 365, and when states and cities and broadband carriers make sure that every household is wired, that really lifts the floor of opportunity. I'm not sure that it is going to close the achievement gap, because I think simultaneously it sort of blows the roof off. That when you have things like Khan Academy, we're already seeing 8th and 9th graders blow through algebra. But I do think it can close or can narrow the preparation gap, which means more students will leave high school ready for college and careers. And I'm excited about that. So Ohio has taken some important steps in this direction. I think it was Senate Bill 153, I think took steps towards extending access to quality courses. An example would be every student in Ohio should have access to every AP course, to every foreign language course, to every high-level STEM course. Right? There's just no reason that you wouldn't offer high-quality, rigorous courses to every kid in Ohio. Right? We're the only ones standing in the way of that happening. I want to say a couple words about how this will happen, and in most cases it will be in blended learning. So the shift to personal digital learning for a few kids will be in virtual schools. I think we'll see at least twice as many students in homeschool and in interesting parent co-ops, but for almost 90% of kids it's going to happen in schools. And most schools in Ohio by the end of this decade will be blended in some fashion, and by that I mean there'll be an interesting mixture of online and on-site activity. Now, when I say blended, I think of it as different than the educational technology that I layered on top of my schools when I was a superintendent. When I say blended, I mean there's an intentional shift to an online environment for a portion of the day in order to improve productivity. That means kids are going to learn more, and that it's going to allow me to think differently about how to staff the school. That, in particular, that there'll be a differentiated and distributed staffing model so that we can leverage the best teacher talent that we have. So our best teachers can now, instead of just teaching 25 elementary kids or 150 secondary kids, our best teachers can really influence hundreds or even thousands of teachers. So personal digital learning is generally going to happen in blended environments, and then I'll just close by saying a couple words about the policy set. For the last couple years, a number of us have worked on a model policy set called Digital Learning Now. It's an advocacy effort that was chaired by Governor Bob Weiss from West Virginia and former Governor Jeb Bush from Florida. And they led an effort that resulted in the 10 elements of high-quality digital learning. And I know some of you have reviewed that and discussed it in board work and in committee work here in Ohio. But I think it's a pretty good outline for state policy. And it basically argues that all kids ought to have access to quality digital learning on a full and a part-time basis. It argues that funding ought to be weighted and portable and at least partially performance-based. That's the tough work that's ahead for Ohio. Weighted means money ought to reflect the challenge. Portable means it ought to follow the kid to the best option. And performance-based means that it should create incentives, not disincentives, for completion and achievement. That Digital Learning Now also tries to address preparation and content, but let's talk about those in the Q&A fashion. Anyway, that's a super quick look at getting smart. It's a subject that you can tell I'm very enthusiastic about, but I hope in our comments we can wrestle together with the real challenges that lie ahead for Ohio. So where would you like to start?
Tom, what's your
Yeah.
thought about mandated online learning,
Yeah.
like the Michigan model versus the,
Yeah, it's that may actually be, interestingly, one of the most controversial elements. So Chad's question is, should states require at least one online learning course for high school graduation? I actually think there ought to be one for every year of high school, and I make two arguments for it. One is, and I think the most important argument is that almost every student will be learning online after they leave high school, whether it's in a post-secondary environment or a corporate environment or a military environment. They'll be learning online. So let's ensure that at least in the last couple years, at least a sixth of their experience is in that environment that they'll undoubtedly be learning in the future. The other rationale that I have for supporting that is that it is an effort to make sure that every student in Ohio has some access, because it forces districts that haven't historically made that an option to at least make some access to online courses available. So that may be the unpleasant reason, the sort of forcing function, but as we think about this difficult change process, I think we ought to have sort of incentives and prods to move districts and schools along. And while this might go against my grain as try not to mandate things, I think this is a pretty good thing to mandate. As somebody pointed out to me last week, we require algebra, and we do it because we think it's good for kids, and I think this can fall into that same category. Yes, Bob?
Expand a little bit. You talked about the private and military. We were talking about how far more advanced they are. Talk a little bit about the world that our kids are going to be going to.
Yeah.
What they're going to face.
So we had an interesting conversation before our session about the fact that blended learning has been around for 20 years. And the military in particular, and some corporations have very sophisticated approaches to blended learning. And by blended learning, my friends at Lockheed have this term they call rapid path to mastery. And they contract to train fighter pilots in 28 countries around the world. And so you think about this sort of life and death training, right? The stakes are really high. And they have incentives built into their contract to get young people to mastery as quickly as possible. And so they experiment constantly with new tools and new experiences and try to get the right mixture of classroom and simulation and flight time so that it's as fast as possible and as inexpensive as possible. The benefit that they have that's difficult for us in K-12 is you can very clearly and at a very discrete level describe the skills required to fly a plane. It's harder to do that when you're trying to describe the skills and mindsets of a productive citizen, right? So our job in K-12 is actually more difficult because we're aspiring to a richer set of outcomes. We want Common Core, like a high level of reading and math, but we actually aspire to more than that. So I think it's a bit, part of the challenge is it's just difficult to put the sort of rapid path to mastery procedures to work when we actually want a broader set of skills. But I think there's a lot that we can learn from the military about getting very clear about outcomes and then mapping back to a set of experiences that are really productive. And I'm excited about adaptive learning for that reason, that adaptive software that can, by the answers that you give, quickly adapt at least the level. And then if you're exposed to a lot of different kinds of experiences, some of them being adaptive, that we can build this motivational profile. So when you sit down with your teacher to discuss your sort of learning playlist in mathematics, that is informed by an understanding of what's going to help you learn best. So yeah, I think a lot of that applies, but I think we also need to be thoughtful about the richer set of outcomes that we want for young people. Corinne, should we talk some more about preparation? It seems complicated. I'm nervous about schools of education. I've almost given up on them. Can they be relevant in this age? What's your take?
Well, the Martin approach and the rapid path to mastery, I was thinking actually we could use that same idea in teacher preparation.
Right.
The elements of, if you break it down into the elements, the simulation piece, the blended learning. Right. We really haven't used that very much in teacher preparation. The whole notion of, you know, when we prepare pilots, they do simulations. We wouldn't think of sending them out on a plane without having, but with teachers, you know, we know classroom management, for example, is a good example. That's one of the most basic. If you can't have classroom management, you won't be able to teach anything.
Right.
But we don't think anything of sending brand new teachers out to a class and say, hey, try out on these kids.
Right.
Whereas now we do have technology that allows us to do simulations.
We do, right.
So I think using that, the elements from that, I think would be really...
Yeah. One concern that I shared with Corinne beforehand is the exciting thing for teachers and more broadly for learning professionals is that there are so many new career opportunities. If you want to be, you know, if you want to be involved in mission-related work, particularly helping other people learn, there are so many exciting new ways to be involved. But you know, your grant program at ETech is going to result in a number of really interesting, innovative schools. And it's going to be very different to teach in school to school. You'll have some virtual schools, you'll have some blended schools, you'll have some STEM schools. And the role of being a teacher or a learning professional in one of those schools is going to be different enough that I think that signals to me at least a portion of, like that last mile of training really has to be sort of closely coupled to the model so that you're really ready for the environment that you're going to step into.
Preparation. I mean, I
I'm
think
with
right
you.
now that, you know, one of the flaws, but really it has been a mandate,
right.
Is that, you know, you're supposed to, a teacher education school is supposed to prepare teachers for any kind of setting.
Right.
Rural,
And maybe some of that is worthwhile, but clearly the back half of it has to be really linked. And Reggie and I were talking about High Tech High and the fact that they got permission from the state to certify their own teachers. That's a small K-12 network in San Diego. So they have their own graduate school of education and they can certify their own teachers, which I think, because teaching at a High Tech High, it's very different than teaching at a school down the street. So I think we're going to need to see more of this happen.
Yeah, I mean if you can have a PhD in math and can't teach in a public school.
Right.
You know, here in the state. So, you know, if you have a person who's working for Verizon Wireless and they want to teach a science class, right. You know, they can't teach it, but they can at High Tech.
Right. But I would also want to make sure that that PhD in math gets adequate preparation for teaching, right? I agree. I couldn't teach my own. You know, I taught for 10 years at an MBA program, but I couldn't teach in my own high schools. Some for good reason, because I was, right? But, so let's build pathways that prepare people for the jobs that they're going to take on. Yes.
I want to shift the conversation now to the students.
Good.
I know when we talk about digital learning, everyone has a different concept of what that is.
Yeah.
And so I want to think about that from the student's perspective.
Great.
You know, Prinsky talks about digital natives and things of that nature.
Yes.
And Stephen Johnson in his book, Everything Bad is Good for You, right?
Right.
Talks about the fact that the brain is actually changing in young people because of media and things that they are exposed to. Can you talk a little bit about that? And do you see this change in digital learning and digital access actually changing the learners that we are engaging? And how does that cause us to re-examine policy re-examine teacher preparation, and the like?
Yeah, those are great questions, and I would first of all say I'm not really qualified to answer. My dad's a neuroscientist, and he'd probably be better qualified to answer the first part of the question of, well, are our kids' brains different? There seems to be some indication that these digital natives are growing up differently, and that is in part means their brains are wired differently. I remember and those of you that have kids have had this experience when you walked into their room and there was a computer with 3 things happening and chat, and there's a television on and the radio is playing, right? And they're on their cell phone, right? And you said, I don't think this is good. And they said, Dad, I got it. I'm on it, right? So they've clearly grown up in this multitasking world. There's some recent evidence that multitasking is a bit of a myth. So I think we need to have some concerns about that. There clearly, for a portion of the day, there needs to be concentrated effort on whether it's reading or writing. And so I think that means teachers and parents do need to manage time. So I can say that with conviction, that managing time online is really important. But I'm also struck by how different these digital natives are, right? If you think about the teachers that are in their first year of teaching, this is the 22-year-olds. This is the first group raised on a cell phone. This is the first group that arrived on a college campus having Facebooked everyone in their dorm, right? So that before they got on the campus, they already had built these connections. So they are different, have grown up with a different experience, and so that gives me some confidence that they'll help lead this shift. So I think you and I we're both excited about the potential, but want to have sort of appropriate caution about the kids' experience. And here's one thing that I am worried about when we think about devices at home, right? You had mentioned at the beginning when every kid's got a tablet that they're taking back and forth to, that creates lots of access to both good stuff and less productive stuff, right? So I do think it creates a new management challenge that for parents and teachers to stay on top of. Yeah.
How do you think schools can best use the fact that the students are digital natives and do know more about technology than the average teacher to help prepare teachers? Because I think the most common thing I thought as a student here at Ohio State was, why does my professor not know how to use the projector? And why doesn't my teacher know how to use the technology that's in the classroom that's there and available? Yeah.
So I guess the 2 things I would say is get kids involved in helping to provide tech support, and it's time for districts to shift their policy. They need a new acceptable use policy that doesn't ban cell phones and tablets, but instead encourages the smart use of those. But I starting in 1995, all my secondary schools were one-to-one, and we had student teams that helped to provide tech support across the school. And the great thing is those iPads are easier to use than the big computers that we were rolling out in '95 and '96. But I think you can still make use of kids and give kids really useful and responsible roles in schools. But it does mean for old people like me to sometimes follow their pride and say, actually, could you help me set up my iPad, right? So I have just become very comfortable asking for help, and I think we need to do more of that. Yes?
It's acceptable use policies. I've been administrator for 36 years. You were administrator.
Yeah.
Sometimes we hide behind laws. We hide behind SIPA.
Right.
And we hide behind E-rate rules and all the things that go with that, because one of our goals as a superintendent is not to get sued. And so how do we get past those rules that are out there to get what's good for children, and not to use that as a buffer and as an excuse for not going to that next step?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, as an administrator, you have more downside than upside, right? I'm still a big fan of these bring your own device BYOD policies. There are a handful of districts that now have really thoughtful, acceptable use policies. Forsyth County, Georgia was an early leader. Jill Hobson is the tech director there. And we were on a panel together a couple months ago, and she said, Tom, every school is a BYOD school. Most of them just don't admit it. Right? So these devices are coming to school. Kids are using them under the table or in the hallway. And so I think it's time to just acknowledge that and say, so this is happening. These devices are at school. Is there a way that we can, through policy and practice, begin to make use of them? Now there's clearly real risks that need to be managed, but I think there's enough districts doing this well now that a good acceptable use policy, a filtered network, and then a culture. And Reggie at the beginning talked about that the culture that you build in the school is even more important than the use policy, and teachers need to be comfortable saying it's a screens up or it's a screens down time. So you have to manage it, but I think the potential to extend learning beyond the school day by incorporating these devices is worth the effort and a small amount of risk.
But you also deal with parents. You're responsible for parents in the community, and some of which say you ought to have it everywhere, and some didn't have it when I was in school, and I learned, and what they do. So you also need to deal with the public's about it.
Yeah, no question. And you know, this is the sort of policy you bring to the board, and some people will love it, and some people will hate it. So that's why you get the big bucks, right? Yeah, it's no, I can appreciate that, but here's what I would do rather than just taking this issue on by itself. What I would have a planning process and a policy process. So if you think about what's going to happen across America, including Ohio, in the next 3 years, you're a member of PARC, I think, and you'll be implementing online assessments probably in 14, 15. So at a minimum, districts need to be having a conversation with the state about how that will happen and how you're going to build enough access to shift to online assessments, and whether that access can be other than a desktop. Maybe it can be a tablet, or maybe it can be a laptop. So you have to agree on screens, and you'll have a conversation about who's going to pay for all of this. So the quote that Chad mentioned, putting a flag in the ground, I think very specifically, starting with a date that says, you know, September, not later than September 2014, we're going to be a digital district. And that means we're going to have a new acceptable use policy. It means we're going to re-examine how the primary access device for kids, and whether and how they can bring a secondary access device to school. We're going to shift our budgets for curriculum and materials. We're going to shift our budgets for professional development, and we're going to begin piloting some new school models that take advantage of technology. And if you lay that all out, I think it fits in that context. Now, there's a lot of ways you can get fired for what I just described, right? What I described a relatively complicated change process, and it has to have a good academic plan and a good financial plan, a good policy plan, a good communications plan, a great human resource plan. And if you don't check each one of those boxes, Bruce, you can be out of a job. So this is difficult, complicated work that we're asking school leaders and teachers to take on. I get it. But I also think it holds real promise to make working conditions better for teachers and to extend learning time and to boost achievement. So I think it's well worth the effort. Bob?
Yeah, you know, Bruce brings up a key point that over the years, been at this a long time, and I've decided that fundamentally it is extremely difficult to change regular district schools because of all the infrastructures. So I'm going to give up on that and go build charter schools.
Right.
Not because that is necessarily better, but it's so difficult. Can you talk about this? Is it possible for school districts with communities and boards and teachers and administrators and all this legacy baggage, can they make this shift into this new world?
That's that's the question, isn't it? And this is sort of where, you know, our lives have been intertwined around this question. You know, some research came out Friday from MDRC that there was sort of a blinding flash of the obvious. They said 10 years later, they said the 400 schools that we helped to fund in New York City worked pretty well. What they didn't tell you is that they replaced 100 schools that had horrible graduation rates. So the new schools actually doubled the graduation rates of the schools they replaced. So we knew in 2002 that this had worked really well. It took till 2012 for it to come out in one of these gold-plated studies. So we know how to develop really good schools, right? And I'm very enthusiastic about new blended schools. That will be the most productive work that folks could do. They'll be great models. They'll show high levels of achievement. The real question is not just the run-of-the-mill school, but the struggling schools. I do think there's the potential for blended restarts. I've been talking about that since 2009. That when the benefit is beforehand we were talking about learning platforms. These platforms are getting better every year, and the ability to walk into a struggling school and to put a platform sort of underneath a struggling structure and say, now at a minimum everybody has access to pretty good courseware and a new set of tools. That's not going to be easy, but I do think it holds more promise than some of the other stuff that we've tried, right? We've tried sort of breaking struggling schools down into academies, changing the structure. I still think it's useful to get people into a smaller environment as a personalization strategy. But I think what we didn't have 10 years ago was a tool set that would provide some access to consistent level quality content, to frequent assessment, to extended learning time. So I think we're bringing a new tool set to an old challenge, but it's still really, really, really difficult to turn around a big, bad high school. I think it got a little bit easier, but I think here's the frustrating lesson learned of the last 10 years. We know how to start good new schools. The best we know how to do is to close bad schools and replace them with good schools, and that's really. I wish I had a different and better answer, but I think your description of this only benefits motivated students is more true for full-time virtual schools. But my sense is that at least 90% or about 90% of Ohio kids are going to go to school, in part because parents enjoy the custodial aspect of school. It is nice to send kids somewhere. And so I think with an engaging tool set in a supportive environment that we can combat a big problem, which is boredom. And that we can do a much better, here's one of the tricks that casual game developers have figured out. It's called calibration. By calibration, it means creating an exercise that is just the right level of difficulty. It's not so difficult that you get frustrated, and it's not so easy that you get bored. So the ability to calibrate, right, to get the difficulty just right and the modality just right in a supportive environment where you have a really interesting mixture of online and on-site activities. I think that's very exciting, and I have seen the benefit that has for kids that have high risk factors and are years behind. So I'm enthusiastic about it for all kids, but most of our kids are really going to benefit from adults that care in an engaging environment, and let's not lose sight of that. That it's a relationship business that we're in, and we have a new tool set that can help, but most kids need at least one adult in their life that gives a damn about whether they're at school that day and what their aspirations are for the future.
One last question and observation, and that is, what really powered the full standards movement was a business community. Kind of the goals 2,000 year. And since, particularly after No Child Left Behind, business has pretty much been on the sidelines. What do you see? I mean, this is right down their alley. They know their own professional development embraces digital technologies and online applications. Do you think we'll see business come back like they did in pushing the standards movement, or do you think they're going to be passive? Get your read on.
Yeah, it's a great question. There does seem to be a good deal of reform fatigue, and I think it's been exacerbated by a really, really awful situation in Congress. And I don't know about you, but I'm really frustrated by the sort of political stalemate that has become Washington, D.C. I'm angry about it. I'm not just frustrated. And I think that we have some versions of that in some states. And the combination of the two, I think, has something to do with less business involvement. When you put those two together, sort of political frustration and reform fatigue, we have more people sitting it out. I think we have developed some enthusiasm for digital learning now. But I think it's an open question. I think it's a good one. I think it's something that state by state we're going to have to reignite interest and engage, not just business, but community organizations so that they're a partner in the shift. Because as I described before, the next 5 years, it's a really, really heavy lift. We're doing so many difficult things simultaneously. The Common Core is a big deal. Those standards are higher and they're different. That by itself would be a heavy lift. And then when you add on top of it online assessments and the shift to digital, I think it's the only way we can get more kids to the Common Core, but it's a lot that we're asking of teachers in schools. So we need an all hands on deck for the next 5 years.
Well, I hope you'll join me in thanking Tom. He's going to
Thanks.
Thank you for having me here today. This has been just incredibly enlightening. I'm pleased to be here. Mr. Vander Ark, you have provided us with a wealth of information I firmly believe that we need to foster a culture of achievement, and to embrace digital learning will help us accomplish just that. I found it insightful in Getting Smart, the book, when you said that a key obstacle that we face is the resistance to digital learning. We need to ask ourselves, why such resistance? First, our students are developing important social and technical skills online, which are often in ways that adults do not understand or value. Hence, the resistance. Second, most students are not taking advantage of the learning opportunities of the internet. But we need to realize that we can't just do it or have them just do it on their own. They can't. And we need to provide the support for them to thrive in the online world of learning. I too believe wholeheartedly that our kids are ready for new learning options. They are ready to learn 24/7, anywhere and everywhere. I firmly believe that the ideal education model truly is whatever works best for each individual learner. The question I see for all Ohioans now is, are we ready and willing to create the educational options that our students truly deserve? We have to realize that technology today is no longer to be considered as an add-on, which it so often is. It's an essential element for a college and career-ready agenda, and personal digital learning will be at the very core of that agenda. We must embrace that idea of doing things differently for better results. With that in mind, I would like to inform all of you of just how the State Board intends to embrace technology in our work. For years, many years, the 19 members of the State Board have received a package prior to each board meeting, which contained a set of board books.
Oh, love it.
These are our board books every month. And this is a slim month because we didn't have any territory transfers. The books I'm holding were from the December board meeting. The cost of printing these books was $25,000 a year. And that does not include the shipping costs for each one of them to be sent to our homes, nor the amount of time spent compiling them. On the use of the iPad, our own state iPad, for our board work, and it will only have board work on it. Will there be an initial startup cost for it? Most definitely. But the savings will be everlasting, and that money can be repurposed. Circling back to the issue of resistance, not everyone on the board was thrilled by the decision. But we are all lifelong learners. It's essential that we embrace new ideas and develop new habits that will propel us forward into the 21st century. We're asking our kids to do it. We need to set an example. Now, are we going to mandate that everyone needs to do this? Absolutely not. But we can take the lead and set that example. Last week, a friend of mine said in a speech, and she said something so profound as part of her speech. She said, we are not simply educating our children anymore. I believe that today we are educating the grandparents of future generations. That is so powerful when you truly stop to think about it. I must ask, if that it is true, why do we feel compelled to cling to the same system and ideas that our own grandparents were raised on? We should focus on doing things differently and for better results. I truly am excited about the prospects for Ohio for the future. Let us look to the future for Ohio students with the distinct possibility of 2/3 of U.S. students doing most of their learning online by 2020. I ask you, shouldn't Ohio get moving? I am thrilled to be here today. I think with our online assessments coming in the 2014 school year, we do have an incredibly large task ahead of us, but we are committed to providing the best educational opportunities to our students, and we need to start doing it today. I thank you all for being here and for working with us in partnership to get this state moving.
You're not alone, Debbie. The Knowledge Works Board was graduated to the use of the iPad for the same reason.
It's going to be interesting.
We've got board members 85 years old and no give. So, well, Tom, we really thank you for giving us a reason to have this. This is National Digital Learning Day. Tom and Getting Smart have really been key advisors to Governor Bush and Governor Wise, and really a whole year's worth of effort that organization, their efforts. And so he's, as I've said, in the middle of all these conversations. So we want to thank you for coming to Ohio today to when you could have been in probably many other venues. But we want to thank, first I want to thank Lisa Duty from Ohio Education Matters Knowledge Works for all her effort in really getting this together and helping really Ohio be a robust partner in today's National Digital Learning Day. So thank you. And thank Ohio State University College of Education as a partner in this, and the Ohio Resource Center for doing all the filming and recording of this. I think this will be online and available, so we really appreciate that. And in particular, Nicole Luthe for your efforts to work with us and really make the day so fulfilling. So thank you very much. And to John Conley, and again, Debbie, thank you for your remarks. And they'll be around, and please enjoy some time with our guests, and we thank you